this is Mrs. Francis, and today we're going to be looking at how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. So there's many different polynomial equations. We're going to be specifically looking at quadratic equations, for example, that we have over here. If we were to multiply those two factors that you see here, we have x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. So this is the polynomial in standard form. This guy right here, this is a quadratic in standard form. And this is the factored form of that same quadratic. And there's something called the null factor law that says that if we factor it and we set either of the factors equal to 0, then the whole polynomial is equal to 0. So if we take this factor and we set it equal to 0 and solve, we get a solution of x equals 2. If we take this factor and we set that equal to 0, we get a solution of x equals negative 5. And that's really all there is to it. So the first part of this lesson is giving you quadratic polynomials that are already factored. And then all you have to do is set each of the factors equal to 0 and solve. So let's do A together. So I'm going to set x equal to 0, this part here, and I'm going to set this part equal to 0. Okay, this one's automatically just x equals 0, and this one becomes x equals 5. So the two solutions for 1a are x equals 0 and x equals 5. Now if I move on to letter B, I'll set 2x equal to 0, this part, and then I'm going to set this part equal to 0. So I'm going to get x equals 0, because if we divide both sides by 2, right, 0 divided by 2 is just 0. And then if I subtract 3 from both sides over here, I get x equals negative 3. So my solutions for this one are x equals negative 3 and x equals 0. So what I would recommend is right here, pause the video, and when you're ready, come back and check your answers for the remaining practice for number 1. Okay, so hopefully you understood how to follow the process for all of these. The only one I'd like to just go back and point out, probably the one you might have stumbled on, is this one right here. So just be really careful. You're going to subtract 7 from both sides. You could have just subtracted x from both sides. I'll do that in green. You could have had 7 equals x and been done right there if you added x to both sides. Or if you did it the way I did it in red here, you subtracted 7 from both sides, and then you just divide both sides by negative 1. Either way, you're going to get x equals 7. So hopefully you're feeling good about all of those. If not, pause your video and ask your teacher a question. So we're moving on here. We have a quadratic equation again, as I said in the beginning of the video, in standard form. And because it's a quadratic equation, it's going to have two solutions. Since the highest power is 2, we're going to have two solutions. We're either going to have two real solutions that are different. We're going to have one solution, but really it just repeats. In this case, it would be x equals 2, x equals 2. Or we can have what's coming attractions for the future, where we end up getting a negative under the radical. If you notice here, if we were to solve this, we'd get a negative under the radical. That's coming attractions. You would end up with two imaginary solutions. Okay, so some of you have been exposed to imaginary solutions, some of you have not. But in that case, we'd have 0 real solutions, but we would have 2 imaginary solutions. So again, just to repeat, you could have 2 real solutions, you could have 1 real solution that's the same, or you could have 2 imaginary solutions. All right, so let's see where we're at here. It says the many methods for solving quadratic equations. Well, you can do what we just did, rewrite it into factored form and then solve the factors. We can rewrite the quadratic and complete it the square form. We can use the quadratic formula, or we can use technology. In this lesson, we're just focusing on factoring. Those other things you'll learn as we go. So just to remind you how to factor. Step 1, if necessary, rearrange the equation so one side is 0. So if we take a look at this guy right here and we look at step 1, we want to move everything to the left. Typically, we move everything to the left and so that we end up with a 0 on the right side. Step 2 says fully factorize the other side. So this part is the part where some of you may forget how to do it. So what you want to do is you want to find all the multiples of -6. So you could have -1 and 6, or you could have 1 and -6. And the next thing you want to do is you want to add them together. So if I add this together, -1 plus 6 gives me 5. 1 minus 6 gives me -5, and we want to use the one that matches the middle term. So if you notice, that matches the middle term of -5. So our factors are going to be x plus 1, right? X plus 1, because we have a plus 1 here, and the other factor is going to be x minus 6. So that's what you see in the second step here. Fully factorize the other side. Then, just like we did on page 1, take those factors and set them equal to 0 and solve. And we end up with x equals 6 and x equals -1. Okay, so we're going to look for all the multiples of +6. So we get 1 and 6, -1 and -6, 2 and 3, -2 and -3. And what we want to do is we want to look at which pair will add to -5. This adds to 7, so no. This adds to -7, so no. This adds to 5, so that doesn't work. But lastly here, this adds to -5, so that is the one we want to use. So our factors are going to be x minus 2 and x minus 3 equals 0. So we end up with x equals 2, x equals 3. All right, so I'm going to ask you to pause the video and try the rest, but I do want to point out to you, when you get to letter E, for example, notice that everything is not already on the left side. So make sure you do that first. So we're going to subtract 2x, and we're going to subtract 8, and then we're going to go from there. Same with letter F. We're going to subtract 10x from both sides. Make sure you're putting things in standard form before you proceed. Okay? You have a few of those scenarios with G, H, and I as well. You want to have the x squared term first, then the linear term with just x in it second, and last you're going to have the constant. When you're ready, come back and check your answers. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. It gave you a good refresher. Good luck, and if you have any questions, just ask the teacher in the room. All right, have a great day.